The Roman Empire has faced invasion by nomadic tribes many times throughout its history. Long before the Alans, the borders of the ancient world were shaken under the hooves of the Sarmatians and Huns. But unlike their predecessors, the Alans were the first and last non-Germanic people who managed to establish significant settlements in Western Europe. For a long time they existed alongside the empire, periodically making neighborly visits to them. Many Roman generals spoke of them in their memoirs, describing them as virtually invincible warriors. According to Roman sources, the Alans lived on both sides of the Don, that is, in Asia and Europe, because, according to the geographer Claudius Ptolemy, the border passed along this river. Ptolemy called those who inhabited the western bank of the Don the Scythian Alans, and their territory European Sarmatia. Those who lived in the east were called Scythians in some sources, by Ptolemy, and Alans in others, by Suetonius. Constantine the Great accepted the Alans into the Roman Empire as federates and settled them in Pannonia. From a threat, they at once turned into defenders of borders of empire, for the right of settlement and a salary. But not for long. After almost 100 years, dissatisfied with the living conditions in Pannonia, the Alans entered into an alliance with the Germanic tribes of the Vandals. It was these two peoples acting together who earned fame as the destroyers of Rome after plundering the Eternal City for 2 weeks. The Roman Empire never recovered from this blow. 21 years later, the Germanic leader Odoacer formally formalized the fall of Rome, forcing the last of the Roman emperors to abdicate. The name of the Vandals to this day remains nominal. Imagine the citizens of Rome who began to imitate the barbarians. Ridiculous seems the mere thought that a Roman dressed in trousers in the Sarmatian style grew a beard and ride a low but fast horse, trying to match the barbarian way of life. This was not uncommon for 5th century Rome. The Eternal City was literally covered by the fashion for everything Alanian. Everything was adopted: military and equestrian equipment. Weapons, Alanian dogs, and horses were especially valued. The latter were not distinguished neither by their beauty nor by their height, but were famous for their endurance, which was attributed almost supernatural character. Fed up with material wealth, Roman patricians sought an outlet in everything simple, natural, primitive, and, as it seemed to them, close to nature. The barbarian village was opposed to the noisy Rome, the ancient metropolis, and the representatives of the barbarian tribes idealized so much that traces of this fashion formed the basis of subsequent medieval legends about the courtesan knights. The moral and physical advantages of barbarians were a favorite theme of novels and stories of the time. For the Alans, as for the rest of the federates in general, the exact opposite process was characteristic. The barbarians preferred to benefit from the achievements of the large civilization on the periphery of which they found themselves. During this period, there was a complete exchange of values. The Alans were Romanized, the Romans were Alanized. But not all customs of the Alans were to the liking of the Romans. Thus, they ignored the fashion for an elongated head and artificial deformation of the skull, which was widespread among the Alans. Today, such a feature in the Alans and Sarmatians significantly facilitate the work of historians, allowing to determine the places of distribution of the latter, thanks to the long skulls found in burials. Thus, it was possible to localize the place of Alans on the Loire, in western France. To achieve the unusual shape of the head, a newborn baby, whose cranial bones had not yet grown strong, was tightly bandaged with a ritual leather bandage decorated with beads, threads, and pendants. It was worn until the bones were strengthened. The elongation of the skull had a ritual character. There is a version that the deformation affected the brain and allowed the Alanian priests to enter trance faster. Subsequently, the tradition was taken over by representatives of local aristocracy, and then it came into wide use together with fashion. According to Flavius Arrian, Alans and Sarmatians were mounted spearmen powerfully and quickly attacking the enemy. He emphasizes that a phalanx of infantry, equipped with throwing shells, the most effective means to repel an attack of Alans. The main thing after that is not to fall for the famous tactical move of all steps, false retreat, which they often turned into a victory. When the infantry with which they had just stood face to face pursued the fleeing and disorganized enemy, the latter turned the horses and overturned the foot soldiers. Apparently, their manner of fighting later influenced the Roman way of warfare. At least, speaking later about the actions of his army, Arrian noted that the Roman cavalry hold their lances and strike the enemy in the same manner as the Alans and Sarmatians. This, as well as Arrian's considerations regarding the fighting capabilities of the Alans, confirms the popular belief that the military merits of the Alans were seriously considered in the West. Their fighting spirit was elevated to a cult. According to ancient authors, death in battle was considered not only honorable but joyful. Happy dead in the Alans was considered the one who died in battle, serving the god. Those unfortunate who happened to live to old age and die in their bed were despised as cowards and became a shameful stain in the family. The Alans had a significant influence on the development of military affairs in Europe. With their legacy, historians associate a whole complex of both military, technical, and spiritual ethical achievements, which form the basis of medieval chivalry. If we believe the study of Howard Reed, the military culture of the Alans played a significant role in the formation of the legend of King Arthur. It is based on the evidence of ancient authors, according to which Emperor Marcus Aurelius accepted 8,000 experienced horsemen, Alans and Sarmatians, for service. Most of them were sent to Hadrian's Wall in Britain. They fought under banners in the form of dragons. The idea of finding an Alanian basis in the Arthurian legend is not new. It is not surprising that the Alans, characterized by such militancy, in alliance with the no less militant tribe of the Vandals, represented a terrible danger. Characterized by a special wildness and aggressiveness, they did not go to the treaty with the empire and did not settle in a certain area, preferring nomadic plunder and seizure of more and more new territories. They reached eastern Spain, took possession of the ships there, and under the leadership of the leader Gaiseric, landed in North Africa. At that time, the African colonies of Rome were not going through the best of times. They suffered from Berber raids and internal rebellions against the central government. In general, represented a tidbit for the combined barbarian army of Vandals and Alans. In just a few years, they conquered the vast African territories belonging to Rome, led by Carthage. To them, in the hands of a powerful fleet, with the help of which they repeatedly visited the coast of Sicily and southern Italy, Rome was forced to recognize their complete independence, and a few years later, their complete defeat. Alans, for all time of their existence, managed to visit many territories and in many countries to leave the trace. Their migration stretched from the pre-Caucasus through most of Europe and into Africa. It is not surprising that today many peoples living in these territories claim to be descendants of this famous tribe. Perhaps the most likely descendants of the Alans are the modern Ossetians, who consider themselves the successors of the great Alania. According to another version, Alans in ancient sources was a collective name for all hunting and nomadic peoples north of the Caucasus and the Caspian Sea. According to the most widespread opinion, only a part of Alans became ancestors of Ossetians, while other parts merged or dissolved into other ethnic groups. Among the latter are Berbers, Franks, and even Celts. Thus, according to one version, the Celtic name Alan comes from the patronymic Alans, who settled in the early 5th century on the Loire, where they mixed with the Bretons. The Alans, who remained in their original settlement territory north of the Caucasus and also for a time east of the Caspian Sea, came into contact and then conflict with the Bulgars, Hekturks, and Khazars, who drove most of them into the mountains. The Alans accepted orthodoxy in the first quarter of the 10th century. Part of the Alans scattered on the steppes were forced by Mongols to the Caucasus, where they played a role in the genotype of Ossetians. Most of the Alans submitted to the Mongol Empire. They participated in the Mongol invasions of Europe as well as in the Battle of Kulikovo. It is also known that 30,000 Alans made up the royal guard of the Yuan court in Dadu, Beijing. Here is what Ammianus Marcellinus wrote about the appearance of Alans. Almost all Alans are people of great height and amazing beauty. Their hair is somewhat yellow, their eyes are terribly fierce.